It's like, and maybe that's what this pandemic has kind of done in MMA and boxing. Is forcing these guys to say, look, if you want to receive the top dollars, you know, these guys are making some neighborhood. I think in Jones was his last fight, Costa. One of them got like maybe it was Adesanya. Maybe got like $500,000. You know, that's $500,000. MMA technically has not, you know, typically has not been paid that much money.
No, not compared to boxing.
Not compared to boxing,
Yeah.
Especially if you try to make a fight like this in boxing. You know, these guys are turning down $2 million. So I think one of the fighters just turned down $2 million to fight Crawford. You know, I forget who it was, but I mean, that's the difference, and that's another thing. The competition in MMA now is just there, and I think if they can keep this up, I think you're going to see the sport continue to grow. Even, I mean, it's grown already in leaps and bounds when you look at what 20 years or so we've been talking
Hopefully,
about.
it'll push boxing to do the same thing too, because they need to compete. They need to compete. They need those numbers, you know. So hopefully, it'll push them towards that.
You know what might hurt, and this is the thing, and DAZN, and I guess we'll talk about this at a time too. But DAZN is going through the lawsuit, of course, now with Canelo, and that whole thing, right? When you sign the contract to the guys, well, the guys at MMA evidently they signed contracts agreeing to let Dana and whoever runs the organization pretty much run their careers. Boxing, you got a fighter, a manager, a promoter, a handler. And then there's a guy that knows absolutely nothing about what he's doing about boxing, who's normally running it. Okay.
Yeah.
So he knows absolutely nothing about it.
It's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, the fighters aren't getting paid what they're worth, and you know, and that's because corporate controls everything. So that's bad, and that needs to stop. If UFC is making $50 million, the fighter should be getting paid $500,000. On the other hand, fights actually happen. So it's and it's still a lot of money. The main problem is for the smaller fighters, because they get chicken feed. You need to be a big name to make anything. But that's the same with boxing too.
But it's the same way with boxing. These guys, we talked about, you know, as we talked about, we'll talk about even the Spence and Donaire and those guys and Lomachenko. Good purses for the average working man, you know what I mean? But for what you're putting on the line.
For world-class athletes,
Yes, world-class athletes. The promoters making the money. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be that night, but I'm sure it's going to be in the neighborhood of 69, 70, $80. And they'll probably wind up doing 400, 500,000 homes that night, which results in a bunch of money. And to say that, you know, these guys are getting $500,000, even if it's $1 million, they're not getting anywhere. The fighters should get, I mean, the fighters, the lion's share. I understand promoters have to spend money, but nowadays, promoters are not even having to spend much money, because why? You don't have to really literally promote it. It's in a place where, you know, you have to worry about
there's the internet. Everyone's talking about it.
Internet.
You got smokes like me making videos about it, you know, just because,
And your promotion dollars are zero. So that's why when people talk about, well, Canelo should be happy, same thing. No, it's not that they're losing money, but they're not losing money, because your production is probably, you know, maybe it's $200,000. I have no idea what they spent. But maybe it's $200,000. Where if it's in the States and everything else, the glitz and glamour has to go around it, you're probably looking at $2, $3, $4, $5 million being spent. So they're saving money. So and with this particular fight, I think it's on the 26th of September. If I'm right, that's the same night. There's another fight that takes place, which I think is the Charlo brothers having a fight on that same. If I'm correct.
Hopefully they're at different times, because I want to see both of those.
Yeah,
they've been pretty good about that. To where the UFC and the different boxing promotions will often move the fights around either earlier or later, and they've both done that. And I love when they do that, because I'll just go to a local. I mean, probably can't now because
now.
But I'll just go to a local sports bar, pay $20. You know, each of my friends pays $20. We get a big table, we drink, and then on one TV screen there's the boxing, and then on the other fight there's the MMA, and they intersect for a little bit during the prelims. But the main boxing fight was like before, and then it switches over to the main MMA fight, and that's just such a good night, you know.
Well, I don't know what island they're on. I don't know whether it's in the UK island or this side. But if it's
that was just a rumor, and then people liked the idea so much. I think maybe because of Enter the Dragon, where they all go to the island, and there's Han and everything, and I mean, that's just a great. I'd like to see that. And they used to do K1 used to do actual tournaments. Like a guy would fight 2 or 3 times in the same night. Each fight would only be 3 rounds, and then you'd have a champion at the end. You know, it's just two guys fight each other. The guy that wins advances on to the next fight. I'd love for the UFC to do something like that with Fight Island. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, well, it probably won't. But I mean, the thing about it, it's not going to take place here for something like that because of all the rules and regulations, and they're going to want you to pay different sanctioning fees for each one.
No, that was all in Japan, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that, well, yeah.
If anything crazy happened, you assume
Hey,
it's just Japan is Fight Island. That's what it is. All right, we are going to be talking about Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, actually, and hopefully going to be an amazing fight. Israel Adesanya is the current UFC middleweight champion. He has a prestigious kickboxing career, one of the best kickboxers to ever live and ever do it. He's currently undefeated in MMA with 19 wins and no defeats, which is a crazy record. Paulo Costa is also undefeated. I think he has something like 13 or 15 fights on his record. His best win is against Yoel Romero, who is a tank given legs and just destroys everybody. But both these guys have fought Yoel Romero, had very different methods. Israel was the technician. He got hit once clean, really hard and rocked, and then just stayed at long range, targeting Romero's leg. Paulo Costa, as he tends to do, just swarmed Yoel Romero and fought him shot for shot, both of them getting hurt at times, and kind of just like an epic clash of two guys just brawling. Although just to call him a brawler would be a disservice to the guy for sure. So Roy, what do you think about this fight?
And MMA is seemingly to be doing some things that boxing used to do in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, putting undefeated fighters together early.
Yes, that never happens in boxing anymore.
Never happens in boxing.
And we'll talk about that. That has to be its own segment too.
Yes, it never happens. So that's what I like about it first. Now, the fact that both guys are undefeated, I think that's a plus. It's like everything else in right now with sports. If there's a downside to a match like this taking place, it's on Fight Island, which means that, we can't attend it. That's over in somewhere, wherever it's on when the guys got too much money to buy an island and put a fight on. So
no fans in the crowd again.
No fans in the crowd.
Which a lot of people are liking, believe it or not, but there's such weird things that go with it. There's fighters taking advice, like, because they have commentators, right? You've commentated fights, and you're close to the ring, but it doesn't matter because of the crowd noise. But you have these commentators who are professional fighters who fought maybe within the last couple of months or years even, and they're commentating on the fight, and the fighters are listening to them, and sometimes they're taking the advice of the commentators, and it's affecting the results of the fights. So it's a very weird time.
It may be the last big fight of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, maybe maybe the last big fight of the year. Depends on what happened in November, December. Now,
both these guys are so skilled. So it's gonna. I think it's gonna be a fitting last fight. What I'm scared of is that when they fought when Israel Adesanya, when Israel fought Romero, he got hit once clean and decided the best thing for me to do is to stay away at long range and target his leg. But Yoel Romero has notoriously bad cardio because for his height, he has like 3 times too much mass for his height. He's like a tank. But Paulo Costa, he gets tired, but he doesn't get tired as easily as Romero. I think he's much younger than Romero. It's probably one of the big reasons. But he's a tank, and he's even taller and bigger. So, I'm sorry.
There's the strikers, guy. The bullies, they have to have that. That's what sells.
Yeah, they have to be able to absorb all that impact. Yeah.
That's what sells. So people want to see, nobody wants to see a guy with all these muscles up here and he stands back and try to be like Ali or, or Bruce Lee, dancing around. No, you almost, we talked about, we mentioned about, I think it was Tommy Hearns and certain guys who, because of their moniker, they decided they didn't want to be what boxing was. They wanted to be the hit man, So rather than use my actual skills, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to try to take care of business at the beginning. But you know what? If the fights are the thing about a fight like this, David, if it's 2 rounds, 3 rounds, it's going to be exciting and people are going to get their money worth. They're going to feel like they got their money.
I think this is a 5-round one because they do that with championships in the UFC. So it's 5-minute rounds. And I think Israel can stay at range and then He's obviously very good at it, and he could tire Costa out over time if he doesn't get caught first. So here's what I find there are two things that I find really interesting about this fight. The first one is that Costa loves to go to the body, like a lot. And for being such a big guy, his body kicks are like lightning fast. You don't see them coming. And his body punches. He's like, here's another guy who's notorious for punching people in the dick, because he just swings and he doesn't really care how it hits, but he targets he targets the body though. And Israel's one of those guys that, like Ali, who's a headhunter. In fact, Israel took the championship in almost like a perfect carbon copy of one of Ali's knockouts that he pulled off. He just rolled back with his chin. You got the guy, chasing him, got the punch, and then came back with that hook, just like Ali used to do. Like, so he's willing to let the punch make contact just so he could roll back with it and punch. And that's, everyone hunts his head, just like Ali. Ali. And no matter what the plan is beforehand, it seems they all fall into that every single time.
You know, when you teach, I always, and I think we talked on this on prior broadcast, but about you teach a kid, you try to say, the head is about this small, right? Mm-hmm. Well, because of the size of your head, mine is pretty big, so equals to my body. But most guys' head is like this, right? Mm-hmm. You got a body that's this big, this wide. Why would you try to hit this that's moving?
Because the head has the mouth, and the mouth is pissing you off with all the words that you say. and that's what Adesanya tries to. Adesanya in a lot of ways tries to be like Ali, and I think his trash talk's a little cringy, honestly, but it works. That everyone's targeting his head, and he has the fancy footwork, and he has the fancy head movement. And Costa has so much power. He's like the Hulk, He's so big. Yeah, I think if he gets into the body, he could slow him down a little bit.
Well, they had their little press conference today. And what they call virtual meetings, and it got a little rowdy.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, that's
really.
So the thing about Paulo is Paulo. Is it Paulo? It's Paulo. Paulo Costa.
Yeah.
And because they spelled it P with an O on it. But when you look at these two guys, they both look so intense. Mm-hmm. That's what I like about it. See, because
no, they're both there to fight. They're both there to finish. Yeah. Israel will stay at range, but he's there to finish it the majority of the time.
He talked about the video that he did that showed Costa running from him. He did a video himself, saying,
"Oh, really?
He's just going to run." Yeah, I mean,
No, he's really good at internet memes and all that kind of stuff, and building his own brand. But I don't think that Costa's going to fall for it. So that's the first thing that makes the fight interesting for me, because it's like we talked about before. It's like with Lomachenko versus Lopez, like, well, yeah, it should just be a blowout because one guy has so much more skill, but it doesn't matter as much in fights where one guy has skill if the other guy can just take a metric, ton of damage to land that one shot. And the fact that it might be a body shot does it for me.
My question is this, and to ask you this, because you no doubt seen a lot more MMA fights than I have seen. Mm-hmm. When a fighter is stunned, okay, let's say, and we know who the power guy is in this particular fight is. The referee tends not to stop the action as much as they will in boxing to say, okay, are you all right? That doesn't happen.
No, the guy gets to just keep pounding on him and see if he survives. Pounding.
So the guy goes to the ground. Now, this is where the strength part comes in. At least I think so. This is where the strength comes in. When you've got the stronger guy who knows, you have to know your weakness, no matter who you are as a fighter. Mm-hmm. You have to know your weakness, and you also have to know the other guy's weakness.
Right.
So whoever I think is able to, I guess, can Costa impose his will on Adesanya if he's able to get him, Adesanya, if he's able to get him in a position where, okay, you're here, we're down on the ground. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't see a tap out in this fight. I may be wrong. I don't think this is the kind of fight that's going to.
I don't think either fighter. I think Paulo Costa, if he's losing, will try to take him down to the ground to stop from getting hit. But yeah. I don't think either person wants to take the other person down in this kind of fight.
You don't think that's going to be? You don't think this is not going to spend a lot of time on the mat, on the camera?
I don't see it happening because Costa wants a knockdown, even though he's built like a wrestler. He wants to just pump. I mean, if he knocks him down, he'll get on top of it of him and start pounding down. But he doesn't have a huge background in grappling. from what I could find. I kept looking because I was so convinced by his body type that he was a wrestler. So
Well, I would have thought
unless the internet failed me, then I don't think he's one of those new breed of guys that just came up mostly with MMA. Like it wasn't his first art, but he didn't really spend too long in his first arts. He was like Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for like a year or something like that.
Okay.
And I think he started competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments from what I read, but I couldn't find anything on his records. So I think he's more than anything, his base is MMA, and that's a new breed of guy. Whereas Israel Adesanya, the exact opposite. His base is kickboxing through and through. Various forms of traditional martial arts that he started out in, but then he just started training as a full-time kickboxer, and then that's the common thing is you have a background art, and then you learn. In his case, he needed to learn how to stay on his feet. The way he does that is pretty much through footwork, which is impressive because
I watched him. Yeah, he's got great balance, man. I mean, this is
insane. Yeah,
balance is insane. You know what? Can you in a fight, in a boxing match, you see a lot of adjustments sometimes, especially against two great fighters. One has this, one has, but you see some fighters able to adjust. I think this is the fight that somebody's going to have to adjust to something that they don't normally do. Because of the size and the power. One guy's definitely stronger than the other. Well, and looks, it appears anyway. So it's the fact that one is stronger, that it should be stronger than the other. But we also know that strength all the time does not determine how those fights are going to end. If you're saying that they're going to be able to spend most of their time up here, these are 5-minute fights. That's an awful lot of action. That's 25 minutes with 1 minute, 2 minute breaks in between. That's an awful lot of action. I think that somebody is going to have to adjust their style. And my thing is, I think it winds up being Paulo Costa.
You think so? Well, he does. Paulo Costa loves to come in with that heavy hook on a lead leg, heavy body hook, right? So he'll jab, and then he'll come in and lean, and then set up that punch there. Which Adesanya is just going to tear apart his leg if he does that. But I feel like Costa's the kind of guy who will just take the hit and keep coming forward. The other thing that's got me really interested, I don't usually get this like technical. I'm going to get like super technical here for a second.
That's what I want you to do, because I have a question I want to ask you.
Okay, let me know. Well, I don't know if this relates to that, but let me know what your thoughts on this. Every boxer has a rhythm, obviously, and the way they maintain that rhythm usually is they get used to these like specific patterns of movement. So hold on, I'm gonna actually like demonstrate this just for the camera. So just let me know if you can't hear me. You should still be able to hear.
Okay.
So some boxers, it's all their footwork, right? Or just fighters in general. They just have that pendulum step going back and forth, and then that makes it really easy to set up their 1-2. Some are Bob and Weavers. They like to go to the side. They just step forward, and everyone breaks their rhythm a little bit, but this is how they set up their punches. This works really well for hooks and uppercuts and all that. Some up and down, some like to twist, like Holyfield loves to twist, and it works really well for Philly Joe and cross guard.
Shoulder roll.
They like to set up, that way. So the thing is, with all those kinds of movements, they keep the fighter's rhythm. They set up threats because that motion sets up their punch, so it disguises it. Manny Pacquiao is a good person to look at because he has a pendulum step, and then he has a kind of tilting side to side whenever he stops moving. He's moving his head instead. The thing that's unique about Israel is that most fighters have like 1 or 2 motions they like to do. They like to bob in, they like to pendulum step back and forth with their feet. Israel is unique in that he changes it all of the time to set up different shots. So he's not doing 1 or 2 motions. He's not just doing the pendulum step. He's not just switching, stances like Willie Pep and then darting back and forth like this on the ropes. He's not just bobbing left and right. He's not just, kind of pulling and then slipping in. He has about 10 setups that he uses, and he sets up all different kinds of shots. It's never the same shot twice. Well, most fighters have their favorite setup. You never know what's coming with this guy, and it paralyzes the hell out of people. So the thing that's different is that I don't think Paulo Costa is going to bite on these feints, because Israel sets up his offense so well by needing to move so little. Like every threat every movement he does is such a potential thing, and he just breaks people's spirit, kind of like what we were talking about with Lomachenko. That Israel controls the fight so much with his feints, with just the intimidation, because he hits so accurate, he knocks guys out. Like you said, I don't know how much power is there, but every shot is just really on the mark, and he's such a trickster. The hardest guy to get, the guy who gave him the most trouble, his name is Kevin Gastelum. And what he did is every time Israel tried to come forward with all those feints, Gastelum would feint like he was coming in too. So he just got him off his rhythm. I think Costa's going to get him off his rhythm in another way by just not giving any kind of about his feints at all. It's like, oh, you move, you twitch a little bit. I don't care. I'm still coming in with that overhand.
I'm still coming in.
Yeah.
See, but that's why, and that's where it beats boxing right now. That's where it's defeating boxing from a standpoint of the action that needs to be there. And as far as the crowd saying, we've got two, because most people would look at a record that says, hey, both these guys undefeated. And that's from the average fan. If they don't know anything about them, all they have to go is look by the record. It doesn't matter that one guy, this guy's 23-12, but he's fought everybody else, and people, and the other guy's, 19-0. They go like, okay, well, who knows who's going to win this one? You got matches like this, it's a toss-up, and that's what makes this. That's what I think continues to make the sport so often. You've had this in MMA a lot of time, where the two top guys came together, they met, got paid pretty well for it, most of them. But that's what you need in this sport, and I think that's it's going to take again for boxing. Again, we talk about this all the time, but the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, you had that. Right now in boxing, you're just not seeming to have that because managers, and we talked about this earlier. You got managers. You got a manager, a promoter, a trainer, and a handler. There's too many people involved in the sport to try to make it. MMA just does not seem to have that problem, and that's what attracts everybody to it. They know they're going to get a fight eventually. You're going to see John Jones fight this guy. You're going to see whoever the next big name is. Even in the girls, the same way. The females, ladies. Oh, gotta say that right. Gotta say, but you're going to see the names the best against each other, and that's what a fight like this. I don't think
you have an undefeated brawler who loves to go to the body, and you have an undefeated technical, different style, but kind of like Lomachenko, like a technician like Lomachenko, although entirely different styles. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and Lomachenko, who's basically undefeated. Let me tell it anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. Although this might be Israel's dick punch fight. So we'll see. Like Lomachenko lost, he had his big punch fight, and now Israel's up against a guy who loves to target the body and just quits a little bit on accident, presumably every once in a while.
I'll be watching.
We'll see.